The doctor's lips moved, but no sound reached the father's world. He stared at his newborn son, heart collapsing with one sentence. He was born deaf. In that silent moment, joy and grief collided, because love was loud, but the future suddenly felt terrifyingly quiet. Daniel had always imagined the first cry of his son as the most beautiful sound he would ever hear. Instead, what echoed inside him was silence, thick, heavy, and suffocating. The hospital room felt smaller after the diagnosis, as if the walls themselves had leaned closer to listen to his shattered expectations. He held the tiny boy in his arms, staring at the peaceful face that knew nothing of the storm his father had begun to feel. "Will he ever hear me call him?" Daniel finally asked, his voice trembling. The doctor's compassionate eyes spoke before her words did. "He will hear you, just not with his ears." Those words should have comforted him, but they didn't. They confused him. Love, to Daniel, had always been spoken, through bedtime stories, whispered reassurances, and laughter echoing in hallways. Now he feared his son would grow up locked in a world he could never fully enter. He kissed the baby's forehead gently. "Noah," he whispered, tasting the name for the first time. "I'll find a way to reach you. I promise." But deep inside, he was terrified that promises made in love might be harder to keep in silence. The first months passed in a haze of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. Noah rarely cried loudly. His cries were soft, almost uncertain, as if even sound itself hesitated around him. Daniel found himself watching his son constantly, searching for signs, any signs, that he was connected to the world. He clapped softly near him, called his name repeatedly, even hummed lullabies that had once comforted him as a child. Noah only smiled when he saw his father's face, unaware of the desperate experiments unfolding around him. One evening, Daniel caught his reflection in the mirror while calling Noah's name again and again. His lips were moving fast, but the baby only watched his expressions, not the sound. That realization pierced him deeply. Was love only meaningful if it could be heard? His wife, Aisha, gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "He doesn't need to hear you to feel you," she said softly. Daniel wanted to believe her. Yet, every time Noah slept peacefully through thunder outside or a door slamming shut, a quiet grief settled inside his chest. He feared his son would miss the world's melodies, and that he, as a father, would somehow fail to give him a complete life. As Noah grew, Daniel's fear slowly turned into determination. He began learning sign language late at night, practicing clumsy gestures in front of his phone, repeating movements until his hands ached. At first, the signs felt unnatural, like speaking a language without a voice. But each time Noah's eyes lit up at a gesture, Daniel felt a fragile hope forming. One afternoon, he signed milk awkwardly, unsure if Noah would understand. The little boy's face brightened instantly, his hands clapping excitedly. Daniel froze. For the first time, communication had happened, not through sound, but through intention. Tears filled his eyes as he hugged Noah tightly. "You understood me," he whispered, voice cracking even though he knew the child could not hear it. That moment changed something inside him. Maybe fatherhood was not about teaching a child to live in your world. Maybe it was about learning to enter theirs. Still, guilt lingered. He remembered the nights he had felt disappointed, the moments he had wished for a different reality. Those thoughts haunted him now. Noah deserved a father who celebrated him fully, not one who secretly mourned what he could not change. Life slowly adapted to a new rhythm of gestures, expressions, and shared understanding. Daniel discovered that silence was not empty. It was filled with eye contact, soft touches, and smiles that said more than words ever could. Yet, society was less patient. Relatives spoke loudly around Noah, as if volume could magically fix his hearing. Some offered pity disguised as sympathy. Others offered unsolicited advice that stung more than it helped. Daniel learned to protect his son from those moments, standing taller, more confident. "He doesn't need fixing," he would say calmly. He just needs understanding. At home, Noah grew curious and observant, noticing vibrations on the floor, watching lips move, and responding to facial emotions instantly. He laughed soundlessly, but his laughter felt no less real. One night, while putting him to sleep, Daniel signed, "I love you." Noah touched his father's cheek gently and mimicked the sign imperfectly. In that quiet room, Daniel realized something profound. Love didn't lose its power in silence. It only changed its language. And maybe, just maybe, his son wasn't missing the world's sound. He was experiencing a deeper, more attentive version of it. Years passed, and Noah became a gentle, perceptive child whose silence carried an unusual depth. He noticed emotions others ignored, responding instantly when someone looked sad or anxious. Daniel often wondered if losing one sense had sharpened another, an invisible sensitivity to the world's unspoken feelings. Still, small worries lingered in his heart. Would Noah ever feel isolated? Would he struggle to belong in a noisy world that rarely slowed down to listen with its eyes and heart? One afternoon at the park, Daniel watched Noah play among other children. While they shouted and ran chaotically, Noah remained slightly apart, observing carefully before joining in. For a brief moment, Daniel's chest tightened with the familiar ache of helplessness. Then something unexpected happened. A little girl nearby began crying after falling from a swing. The other children kept playing, unaware of her silent tears. But Noah noticed immediately. He walked toward her, gently touched her shoulder, and signed something Daniel couldn't see clearly from a distance. The girl stopped crying. She smiled. Daniel leaned forward, confused and curious, sensing that he was about to witness something he had never truly understood before. Daniel walked closer, curiosity pulling him forward like an invisible thread. The little girl watched Noah's hands move in slow, careful gestures. Though she didn't know sign language, she seemed to understand his intention, his concern, his quiet reassurance. Noah pointed gently to her scraped knee, then mimicked a brave face, puffing his cheeks and pretending to wipe away imaginary tears. The girl giggled through the remnants of her pain. Daniel froze. No sound had been exchanged, yet comfort had been given and received. It was pure, unspoken empathy. For years, Daniel had worried that Noah would struggle to connect with others. But in that moment, he realized something unexpected. Noah wasn't disconnected from the world. He simply communicated through a language deeper than sound. A sudden wave of humility washed over Daniel. He had spent so long grieving what his son lacked that he hadn't fully seen what he possessed, a rare ability to notice silent suffering, to respond with presence rather than noise. As Noah returned, proudly holding the girl's fallen toy, Daniel knelt and hugged him tightly. "You're amazing," he whispered, voice shaking, even though Noah could not hear it. But somehow Noah understood. That evening, Daniel couldn't stop replaying the scene in his mind. The image of Noah comforting the crying girl without a single spoken word kept returning, challenging every fear he had carried since the diagnosis. He sat quietly at the dinner table, watching his son laugh silently while signing animated stories to Aisha. "Did you see him today?" Daniel finally asked. Aisha smiled knowingly. "I see him every day." Her simple reply pierced him. Daniel realized that his wife had accepted Noah's world much earlier than he had. She hadn't measured their son by what he couldn't hear, but by what he could feel. Meanwhile, Daniel had spent years trapped between love and quiet regret, afraid of a future he couldn't control. He reached across the table and signed clumsily, "Proud of you." Noah's face lit up instantly. He clapped excitedly and hugged his father with unexpected strength. That hug felt different, less like comfort given to a child, and more like reassurance offered back to a parent who was still learning. For the first time, Daniel wondered if the one being taught wasn't Noah, but him. As Noah grew older, his unique awareness became more evident. He noticed when his mother felt tired even before she admitted it. He would quietly bring her a glass of water or hug her tightly, as if sensing emotional vibrations invisible to others. Daniel began to observe his son more carefully, realizing that silence had trained Noah to read the world differently, through expressions, posture, and the smallest shifts in energy. One afternoon, Daniel returned home exhausted after a difficult day at work. He forced a smile, not wanting to worry anyone, but Noah immediately approached him, placing small hands on his cheeks and tilting his head with concern. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He hadn't said a word, yet his son had understood his sadness completely. "I'm okay," he mouthed weakly. Noah shook his head gently and hugged him tighter. That silent embrace broke something open inside Daniel, a realization that love didn't need to be spoken to be deeply felt. Sometimes words only masked pain, but presence revealed truth. In that quiet moment, Daniel felt both comforted and humbled. His son, once seen as fragile, was becoming his greatest emotional anchor. School brought new challenges. Noah struggled at first, not because he couldn't learn, but because the world moved too quickly without pausing to understand him. Some children were kind, others impatient, and a few unintentionally cruel. Daniel's heart ached each time he imagined his son feeling left out in a noisy classroom, full of voices he could never hear. One evening, Noah returned home quieter than usual. His shoulders were slightly slumped, his usual spark dimmed. Daniel's chest tightened immediately. "What happened?" he signed gently. Noah hesitated, then slowly signed. "They laughed when I didn't respond." The words hit Daniel like a storm. Rage, sadness, and helplessness swirled inside him. He wanted to protect his son from every harsh moment life might throw at him, but he also knew he couldn't fight all of Noah's battles. Kneeling in front of him, Daniel signed firmly, "You are not less. You are different, and different is powerful." Noah studied his father's face carefully, searching for certainty. Daniel held his gaze with unwavering conviction, silently promising that he would always be a safe place, his strongest voice, even in a world full of noise. Days later, something unexpected happened during a school assembly. Students were asked to present something unique about themselves. Daniel worried Noah might feel anxious standing on stage in front of so many people. But to his surprise, Noah volunteered confidently. Standing under the bright lights, Noah didn't speak. Instead, he began signing a story about friendship, kindness, and understanding differences. At first, the room was confused and a teacher translated his gestures aloud. The hall slowly fell silent, not out of confusion, but respect. Daniel felt his heartbeat echo in his ears as he watched his son command an entire room without uttering a single sound. Noah's expressions, movements, and emotion-filled gestures told a story more powerful than words. By the time he finished, many students were wiping away tears. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Noah only saw the smiles and clapping hands, visual echoes of appreciation. Daniel realized then that his son wasn't limited by silence. Instead, he was teaching others to listen differently. And for the first time since that day in the hospital, Daniel no longer saw his son's deafness as a loss. He began to see it as a different kind of gift. That night, Daniel sat alone in the living room, replaying the school assembly again and again in his mind. The image of Noah standing confidently on stage, speaking through gestures instead of words, filled him with a strange mixture of pride and regret. Pride for the brave boy his son had become, and regret for all the years he had quietly pitied him. He realized how often he had underestimated Noah's strength, mistaking silence for limitation. But silence had never made Noah weak. It had made him observant, empathetic, and deeply aware of others' emotions. Daniel looked at an old photo of the day Noah was born. He remembered the fear that had gripped his heart back then, the fear that his son would miss out on life's joys. Now he understood the truth. Noah hadn't missed anything. Instead, he had discovered joys that many people, lost in noise and distractions, often overlooked. Tears rolled down Daniel's cheeks as he whispered to himself, "I'm sorry for ever doubting you." In that quiet apology, Something inside him finally healed. Weeks passed, and Daniel noticed a new confidence in Noah. He interacted more freely with classmates, teaching them simple signs and laughing silently as they tried to imitate him. What once felt like a barrier was slowly becoming a bridge. One afternoon, a parent approached Daniel at school. "Your son helped my daughter feel less scared during a fire drill," she said warmly. He held her hand when the alarm went off because she panicked. Daniel blinked in surprise. The loud alarm that terrified hearing children had not frightened Noah, but he had still recognized fear in someone else and responded with compassion. That realization struck Daniel deeply. His son, who lived in silence, had learned to listen to emotions instead of sounds. He noticed distress, loneliness, and hesitation faster than most people ever could. That evening, Daniel signed to Noah, "You help people feel safe." Noah smiled shyly and signed back, "You taught me kindness." Daniel's chest tightened with emotion. He had worried for years about what he could teach his son, but now he saw clearly. Noah had been teaching him all along. How to listen without ears, how to love without conditions, and how to see people beyond their limitations. Despite the growing positivity, life still presented moments of quiet struggle. There were days when Noah felt frustrated watching other children chat effortlessly, sharing jokes and whispers he couldn't hear. Daniel could see those moments in the slight tension of his shoulders and the way his smile faded just a little. One evening, Noah signed slowly, "Do you ever wish I was different?" The question froze Daniel's heart. It carried years of unspoken fear and vulnerability. He knelt immediately, holding Noah's hands firmly. "I once wished for an easier life for you," he admitted honestly through signs, his movements deliberate and emotional. "But I never wished for a different you." Noah studied his father's eyes carefully, searching for truth beyond the gestures. Daniel continued, "You are exactly who you are meant to be, and you make our lives richer, not harder." A long silence followed. Then Noah hugged him tightly, relief melting the hidden insecurity he had carried. In that embrace, Daniel realized that children don't just need protection from the world. They need reassurance that they are fully accepted, exactly as they are. Time moved gently forward, and Noah entered his teenage years with quiet confidence and emotional maturity far beyond his age. He began volunteering at a local center for children with special needs, using sign language and expressive storytelling to connect with them. Daniel often watched from a distance, amazed at how naturally Noah comforted those who felt different or misunderstood. One day, Daniel overheard a mother say, "Your son gives my child hope. He shows him that being different doesn't mean being broken." Those words struck Daniel deeply. For so long, he had feared society would see Noah as incomplete. Instead, Noah was becoming a source of strength for others who felt lost in their own struggles. Driving home that evening, Daniel glanced at Noah in the passenger seat, animatedly signing about his day. The sunlight danced across his face, and for the first time, Daniel felt no trace of sorrow, only gratitude. He realized that life had not given him the child he had expected. It had given him the child he needed. Late one night, Daniel found himself watching an old video from Noah's early childhood. In it, baby Noah smiled widely while Daniel clapped loudly beside him, desperately hoping for a reaction. The memory once carried pain, but now it felt different, almost tender. He paused the video and whispered softly, "I was so afraid back then." Looking toward Noah's room, Daniel reflected on how fear had slowly transformed into understanding, and understanding into admiration. His son had never been broken or incomplete. He had simply experienced life through a different lens, one that noticed subtle emotions, silent struggles, and quiet beauty others often ignored. Daniel realized something profound. Sometimes parents think they must guide their children through life, but occasionally, children guide parents toward deeper compassion and awareness. Closing the laptop, he signed gently into the empty room, "Thank you for teaching me how to listen with my heart." Though Noah couldn't see the gesture, Daniel felt certain that somehow, in the invisible language of love, the message had still reached him. One rainy afternoon, years later, Daniel stood near the window watching Noah help a young boy at the community center. The child, recently diagnosed with hearing loss, looked frightened and withdrawn, exactly how Daniel had once imagined his own son would feel growing up. But Noah knelt calmly, meeting the boy's eyes with gentle patience. He signed slowly, encouragingly, showing him that communication was still possible. That connection had never depended solely on sound. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He remembered his own panic in the hospital years ago, the heavy grief that had clouded his joy when Noah was born. If he could travel back in time, he would hold that younger version of himself and say, "Don't be afraid. This silence will teach you more about love than noise ever could." Watching Noah laugh silently with the boy, Daniel realized something unexpected. His son wasn't just living a fulfilled life. He was transforming others' lives too. In that quiet room filled with unspoken words and expressive hands, Daniel saw the truth clearly. What once felt like a limitation had grown into a powerful gift, one that spread empathy, patience, and hope to everyone Noah touched. That evening, Daniel and Noah walked home together under the soft glow of streetlights. Their conversations flowed through gestures and expressions, comfortable and effortless. Daniel noticed how people sometimes stared briefly, curious about their silent communication, but he no longer felt defensive. Instead, he felt proud. Halfway home, Noah suddenly stopped and signed, "Are you happy?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He looked at his son's calm, searching eyes and realized how much courage it must have taken to ask. Daniel took a deep breath and signed carefully, "I am happier than I ever imagined I could be." Noah's face softened with relief, and he nodded slowly. Daniel added, "Not because life was easy, but because you showed me what really matters." They continued walking, hands brushing lightly, the silence filled with warmth rather than emptiness. Daniel understood now that happiness wasn't about perfect circumstances. It was about meaningful connections, about learning to see beauty in unexpected places, and about embracing life exactly as it unfolded, even when it didn't match your original dreams. Years passed, and Noah grew into a compassionate young man known for his ability to comfort others without saying a single word. Teachers, neighbors, and even strangers often spoke about the calm presence he carried. Daniel would listen quietly, his heart swelling each time someone praised his son's kindness. One day, during a family gathering, an elderly relative whispered to Daniel, "It must have been very hard raising a deaf child." Daniel paused, reflecting deeply before responding. "It was hard at first," he admitted gently, "not because of him, but because of my own fears." He explained how he had once mourned the imagined life Noah might miss, only to discover that his son experienced the world more attentively than most people ever did. The relative nodded thoughtfully, but Daniel knew his words were more for himself than anyone else. He had finally made peace with the past. The fear, the doubt, the quiet regrets, they no longer haunted him. Instead, they had shaped him into a more patient, compassionate father who now understood that love wasn't measured by perfection, but by acceptance. One quiet evening, Daniel found Noah sitting alone on the porch, watching the sunset. The sky glowed in soft shades of orange and gold, reflecting in Noah's thoughtful eyes. Daniel sat beside him without speaking, both of them sharing the peaceful silence that had once frightened him years ago. After a moment, Noah signed slowly, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Daniel smiled softly, recognizing the echo of a question Noah had asked as a child. He shook his head firmly and signed no. "Because if things were different, I might never have learned how strong, kind, and extraordinary you truly are." Noah looked down, touched by the sincerity of those words. Daniel continued, "You didn't lose sound, Noah. You gave us a deeper way to listen, to emotions, to people, to life itself." The sunset faded quietly, but the warmth between them remained. In that moment, Daniel understood something profound. Sometimes what we fear as loss becomes the very thing that transforms our hearts and reveals life's most meaningful truths. On Noah's graduation day, Daniel watched proudly from the audience as his son walked across the stage, confident and calm. The applause thundered through the hall, but Noah simply saw smiling faces and clapping hands, visual waves of appreciation that meant just as much as sound ever could. When Noah reached him afterward, he signed with a bright smile, "Did you see me?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he nodded. "I've always seen you," he signed back. In that instant, Daniel realized the journey they had traveled together, from fear and uncertainty to acceptance and profound pride. His son had not just grown up strong. He had taught his father to redefine strength itself. Daniel hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by gratitude. The child he once feared for had become the man who gave him courage, empathy, and a deeper understanding of love. And standing there, surrounded by celebration and silent understanding, Daniel finally saw something he had never expected years ago. His son had never needed to hear the world. The world needed to learn how to truly hear him. Sometimes, what we first see as loss becomes life's greatest lesson. Love doesn't need sound. It only needs understanding. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and join our Heart Angels family, where silent courage and unconditional love remind us what it truly means to listen with the soul.